Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
History, often told by those in power, is an intricate tapestry woven with victories, losses, cultural exchanges, and unspoken tragedies. Beneath the shining narratives of empires and their conquests, shadows lurk, shadows that conceal uncomfortable truths deliberately erased, buried, or rewritten to suit the victors. Among these shadows lies a deeply complex and dark chapter of human history, the untold legacy of Arab imperialism and its impact on Africa and the broader world. The Arab world, celebrated for its golden contributions to science, literature, and architecture during the medieval period, often hides a darker, less glamorous history beneath the veneer of cultural grandeur. While the Arab caliphates expanded their influence across vast territories, leaving indelible marks on civilizations, their dominance also came with exploitation, brutality, and the erasure of entire cultures and peoples. This history, deliberately sanitized or ignored, deserves closer scrutiny. It is a story of conquest and enslavement, a tale of economic greed and racial hierarchies, and a testament to the resilience of those who survived. This article seeks to unearth these uncomfortable truths, peeling back layers of revisionism to reveal the lived experiences of the oppressed. As we journey through the labyrinth of Arab expansion, the trans-Saharan slave trade, and cultural erasure, we aim to understand not just the historical events, but also the motivations behind the concerted efforts to erase this past. In doing so, we confront a powerful question: why is this history so often overlooked? And what does it reveal about the nature of power and memory in shaping human narratives? The story begins in the 7th century CE, when the Arabian Peninsula, unified under the banner of Islam, embarked on a sweeping wave of conquest. Within a century, Arab armies had established one of the largest empires in history, stretching from the Iberian Peninsula in the west to the Indus Valley in the east. These conquests were not merely military feats. They were cultural and religious revolutions that reshaped the societies they touched. However, beneath the glory of the caliphates lay the realities of empire building, the subjugation of local populations, the extraction of wealth, and the establishment of hierarchies that privileged Arab Muslims over non-Arabs and non-Muslims. While Islam preached equality among believers, the practical application of this principle often fell short, particularly when dealing with populations deemed inferior by the conquerors. In Africa, the Arab expansion southward into the Sahara and beyond opened new frontiers for trade and exploitation. The introduction of Islam to African societies is often celebrated as a moment of cultural and spiritual enrichment, but it also brought profound disruptions. Arab traders and rulers imposed new economic systems, religious practices, and social hierarchies that marginalized indigenous traditions and institutions. One of the most glaring yet overlooked aspects of Arab history is the trans-Saharan slave trade. While the transatlantic slave trade perpetrated by European powers has been extensively documented and condemned, the Arab-led slave trade remained shrouded in relative obscurity. Yet, it spanned centuries and affected millions of lives, leaving scars that endure to this day. Unlike the transatlantic slave trade, which was largely focused on agricultural labor in the Americas, the trans-Saharan slave trade had a broader range of purposes. African men, women, and children were captured or purchased and transported across the Sahara Desert to serve as domestic servants, concubines, soldiers, and laborers in Arab and Islamic societies. The journey itself was harrowing, with countless captives perishing in the unforgiving desert heat before reaching their destinations. Arab slave traders targeted East Africa in particular, creating networks that extended from modern-day Kenya and Tanzania to the Arabian Peninsula, Persia, and beyond. The island of Zanzibar became a notorious hub for the trade, with its markets bustling with human misery. The legacy of this trade is still visible in the region, where populations with mixed Arab and African heritage often grapple with complex identities and lingering social stigmas. Despite its scale and impact, the trans-Saharan slave trade has been systematically downplayed or ignored in many historical narratives. Part of this erasure stems from the enduring power dynamics between the Arab world and Africa, as well as the reluctance of some modern Arab nations to confront this aspect of their past. Arab expansion into Africa did not merely disrupt societies, it also sought to overwrite them. Indigenous African cultures, languages, and traditions were often dismissed as pagan or backward, and were actively suppressed in favor of Arab Islamic norms. This cultural imperialism was particularly evident in the Sudan, the Horn of Africa, and the Sahel, where Arab settlers and rulers imposed their language, religion, and social systems on local populations. The Arabization of Africa was not simply a byproduct of Islamic conversion. It was a deliberate strategy to consolidate power and control. By erasing or marginalizing indigenous identities, Arab rulers could foster a sense of unity under their authority while undermining potential resistance. This process often involved the destruction of cultural artifacts, the suppression of local languages, and the rewriting of histories to downplay or erase African contributions. One of the most tragic examples of this erasure is the history of Nubia, an ancient African civilization that thrived along the Nile River for millennia. Once a rival to ancient Egypt, Nubia was gradually Arabized and Islamized, its rich cultural heritage subsumed under the dominant Arab Islamic identity. Today, much of Nubia's history remains obscured, its monuments and traditions overshadowed by those of its conquerors. Religion has often been used as a tool of domination, and the Arab conquests were no exception. While Islam brought profound spiritual insights and ethical teachings, it was also wielded as a justification for imperialism and exploitation. Non-Muslims were frequently subjected to discriminatory laws and practices, including higher taxes, jizya, restrictions on worship, and limitations on social mobility. In the context of the trans-Saharan slave trade, religion was used to rationalize the enslavement of African populations. While Islamic law technically prohibited the enslavement of fellow Muslims, this prohibition was often circumvented through legal loopholes or outright hypocrisy. African captives were frequently labeled as kafirs, non-believers, to justify their enslavement, even when they had converted to Islam. This duality highlights the complexities of Arab Islamic history, where lofty ideals often clashed with the realities of empire and economic exploitation. It also underscores the ways in which religious narratives can be manipulated to serve the interests of power. The erasure of this history is not merely a relic of the past. It continues in various forms today. In many Arab nations, the darker aspects of their history, particularly those involving Africa, are rarely taught or discussed. This silence is compounded by the global focus on European colonialism, which often overshadows other forms of imperialism and exploitation. At the same time, some African nations have sought to reclaim their histories, challenging the narratives imposed by Arab and European colonizers alike. Scholars, activists, and communities are working to unearth forgotten stories, preserve endangered traditions, and assert their identities in the face of historical erasure. The untold history of Arab imperialism and its impact on Africa is a sobering reminder of the complexities of power, memory, and identity. By confronting this history, we not only honor the resilience of those who endured these injustices, but also gain a deeper understanding of the forces that have shaped our world. In doing so, we challenge the narratives that seek to divide us and affirm the interconnectedness of human history. The journey to uncover these truths is far from over. It is a journey that requires courage, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to justice. For in the shadows of history lie not only the sins of the past, but also the seeds of a more honest and inclusive future.